Weekend prime time. We're going to begin tonight with a political earthquake in Texas. Conservative political operatives in the Lone Star State often like to say that so goes Tarrant County, so goes the rest of America. Well, in District 9, which Trump won by 17 points in 2024, Democrat Taylor Rimmet just pulled off a major upset victory against Trump-backed Republican Lee Wamsgans for the state Senate. That part of North Texas has long been seen as a hub for conservative political activism and is really a hotbed of Christian nationalism. So Rimmet, winning almost 60% of the vote there, that is a huge deal for Democrats. Rimmet is a pro-union, pro-public schools veteran and machinist, and is a first-time candidate. He caught people's attention after he overperformed in November's election and triggered a runoff, and he pulled in support from national Democratic groups, including the DNC. Wamsgans is a conservative darling and operative, maybe most well known for waging the original anti-DEI and anti-CRT battles in schools all across that part of Texas. She spent millions more on her campaign than Rimmet did, and she has close ties to Steve Bannon, whose podcast she spent the last month on, appearing to urge Texans to come out and vote for her. In the end, it seems, though, it just wasn't enough. Well, guys, this is a big deal. I don't know if you remember that as a team we talked back in spring about a group of sort of little-known school board races in the very same part of Texas, and a whole bunch of candidates who had been backed by a very conservative Christian nationalist-aligned group called Patriot Mobile there. They had lost races that people thought they were shoo-ins for. That is the group that Lee Wamsgans is part of operating. She's been incredibly successful for years in Texas and actually beyond with that work. For years now, Democrats in this part of the state have been feeling like they had no hope at all. Just to see what happened in the spring, her candidates lose their spots on school boards, and then to see this happen to her tonight, it's not just, I think, for Democrats a moment of hope there, but for Republicans, a moment of real reckoning. Because this is really like a hotbed. It is an operative center. It is an incredibly influential part of an influential state. And this, I think there are people who will tell you, oh, it's a special election. Maybe it doesn't matter much. But this is a major sign, a major bellwether in my view.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
My question to you is, I've heard you and others say before, as goes Tarrant County, so goes America. Why is that the case? If it is like this deep red conservative district, which seems like that's why it's newsworthy, or one of the reasons why it's newsworthy that a Democrat captured this race. Why is it seen as a bellwether as opposed to like a traditionally conservative place?
So the part of Texas, the district, is a little different than just Tarrant County itself. And the district is deep, deep red. It's been decades since a Democrat has been able to get this seat. However, Tarrant County actually went for Joe Biden in 2020. It is Fort Worth, sort of. Yes, just by a little bit, but it shocked Republicans and bothered them at the time. And it was a sign that there were all these people, who were there working in Dallas and who were from other parts of the country. Maybe we're not sort of seen as traditional Texans who had started moving into this metropolitan area, into the suburbs there that have very good schools. And so it was starting to sort of become purple. And there was this major sort of strategic effort around that to take it back, basically, on the right. And so it's an interesting bellwether because to see it swing, not just a little bit, but massively, that is a major signal. And the other thing that we're hearing from operatives there is that when they dig into the data that's starting to come out now, it's not the case that it's like a lot of Democrats necessarily came out of the woodwork and they hadn't voted in the past and now they're energized for the first time. It's that they were able to flip both a ton of independents and moderates, but also some Republicans came out and voted for this pro-union, pro-public schools Democrat.
Well, that was a quote that was in this article that the Fort Worth newspaper had that was talking about voters at 3 different polling places said that they were sick of extremism. And there was a Trump voter talking about they actually did vote Democratic in this race just because it had gotten to be too much. And you look at the backdrop of what you've reported on the culture wars there, your South Lake podcast and everything happening with the schools. And you have actually a Democratic candidate who fit the area, who fit the more conservative mold, who works at, I know he's a machinist, he's a union guy, and he's an Air Force vet and had the kind of profile that could work in that area.
Yeah, I will say, though, he didn't shy away from issues that I think maybe other Democratic strategists would have warned a candidate like that to stay away from. He was not afraid to say that he, celebrated diversity, that he cared about public schools in an area where the anti-CRT wars were not just successful, but had really been engineered. In fact, Lee Wamsgans and a lot of the operatives there, they would get on Zooms and calls with strategists in other states and teach them how to run these school board races and recreate what had happened in Texas after George Floyd's murder and basically recreate it all across the country.
Well, maybe the Democrats will be recreating that little strategy as the rule, the playbook for other places.
All right. Well, the Tarrant County race garnered national attention for months, but it went to another level last week after President Trump gave GOP candidate Lee Wamsgans his full endorsement, calling her a great candidate. But in classic Trump fashion, he's now pulling the, well, I hardly know her reaction to the loss. Look at this.
Mr. President, Texas, a Democrat won your special election in an area that you had won by 17 points. What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative. The 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race. You mean I won by 17?
You did.
And this person lost? Things like that happen.
Does it worry you about the...
Well, you don't know whether or not it's transferable. I'm not on the ballot, so you don't know whether or not it's transferable. But, you put the Democrats in, you'll end up with open borders again. You'll end up with crime all over the place. We have no crime anymore. So it's very good. No, I don't know anything about it. I didn't know. I mean, I know there's a race going there. And it's too bad. What can I say? I have nothing to do with it.
And now joining us at the table, Molly Jong-Fast, MS Now political analyst and host of the Fast Politics podcast, and Maria Kamela, former chief of staff for former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Molly, I'm going to start with you. Yeah. All right. What do you think of this? Do you think this is just a special election, a funky result, or do you think it's a big deal?
Well, I want to say, I feel like there's another issue here that we're not talking about, which is this administration is really in trouble with Latino voters. And there is a Democratic mayor in Miami for the first time in 20 years. And what you're seeing, there was a real public outcry about what's been happening with ICE. But it's important to realize, we are seeing a lot of Latino voters getting arrested and stopped. And a lot of times they are legally here or they have asylum. And so
they're citizens.
Right, exactly. And so I think, or they're related to citizens and they've been here for many, many years. And I think that they also see that the Texas, in Florida, in California, these are going to be real problems for the Republicans.
Well, and if Republicans can't hold the Hispanic voters that they want in Texas, it does change the map there a bit. And Maria, I want to ask you if you see this as Republicans, they got caught up in their own bad primary battle, so they already had an inter-party fight that they lost the runoff. They didn't win outright. This went to a runoff, fought each other, just asleep at the wheel, and a Dem managed to come in? Or do you think this represents energy among Democrats and a changing of the guard of sorts?
So I think it's two things. I wouldn't over-index on it because I think there's some lessons coming out of this. I think the first thing, which I think is really interesting, is who actually turned out, right? The modeling showing, looking at 51% Republicans, 35 Dems, 14% independents. So that tells me, right, that you had a Democrat win because they persuaded Republican independent voters, I would say the same soft, disenchanted Republican voters who held their nose and voted for Donald Trump, primarily on the issue of affordability, which obviously isn't playing out. And then you also had a candidate who I think was a good candidate with a good message, and I think that is equally important. So if I were a Democratic Party and I was looking at the map, I would say, okay, where do I have candidates who, meet their constituency, right? I think you guys were talking about it earlier, right? You have a candidate here who's a veteran, right? He's a machinist. He really leaned into the working class messaging. He had, he stressed unity, the ability to work together, and that worked. And I think that's a message for Democrats. And I think they weren't able to do this this in 24 for a lot of reasons, where you need to win independents in swing districts, right? And you need to get persuadable Republicans, and there are persuadable Republicans. And I think it's the same, it's the same group of voters who I think are also most impacted and most have the most concern, right, in terms of how this administration's been handling the immigration issue, right? Like, they feel the most uncomfortable about this. And so I think all of those elements combined actually give Democrats a real opportunity.